Another mile, just one more mile. I'm tired of walking all alone. Lord, help me smile. Another smile, just one more smile. You know I just can't make it on my own. Never thought I needed help before. I thought that I could get by myself. Now I know I just can't take it anymore. With a humble heart on bended knees, I'm begging you, please help me. Come down from your golden throne to me, lowly me. I need to feel the touch of your tender care. Remove these chains of darkness and let me see just where I fit in your master plan. Never thought I needed help before. I thought that I could get by myself. Now I know I just can't take it anymore. With a humble heart on bended knees, I'm begging you, please help me. With a humble heart on bended knees, I'm begging you, please help me. I hear my Savior say, your strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me your all. Lord, now indeed I find your power and yours alone can change a leper's spots and melt this heart of stone. Oh, Jesus, Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. All to him I owe. My sins left a crimson stain. He washed it white, made all things right. He washed me white as snow. For nothing could have I, whereby your grace to claim. I'll wash my my garments white in the blood of Calvary. Calvary's Lamb. Oh, Jesus, Jesus paid it all to Him I owe, all to Him I owe. My sins left a crimson stain. He washed it white, made all things right. He washed me white as snow. Oh, Jesus, Jesus paid it all to Him I owe, all to Him I owe. My sins left a crimson stain. He washed it white, made all things right. He washed me white as snow. He washed it white, made all things right. He washed me white as snow.
Thank you guys. Come to me. You guys can get seated, get ready for the teaching tonight. Welcome and greetings to everybody that's in here and everybody that's out there. This is the Children of the Free Church Ministry. And my name is Charles Garcia. We gather live every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And expect those that are serious to gather with us. Like I always repeat, you can watch live and you're going to watch again on archives on this site, childrenofthefree.com, on YouTube, and on Facebook. November 10th is the United States Marine Corps' birthday. It's the 238th birthday of the Marine Corps, probably the finest fighting force in the world. And so I want to say happy birthday, Marine Corps, and thank you for protecting us. Now, tonight's message is going to be unusual. It's going to be different, unless you've heard it before. Then it's not going to be different. There's always a different aspect of the jewel that God reveals. We were taught, and I was taught in my original training by Dr. Gene Scott, and now we teach here and have taught for 5 years, put flesh and blood on the Bible. Put flesh and blood on the personages that we talk about and the passages, the events. Or another way of saying that is put yourself in there. Make it real. That's point number one. Point number two is, we sometimes pray to God that we want to do what He wants. Said in different ways. Show me the way. What steps should I take? I'll go where you send me. I'll go where you lead. Well, tonight we're going to join those two concepts that I just mentioned together. And I think what's going to happen when we do that, is we're going to come up with a different viewpoint. And we're going to do that by going to the books of Isaiah and Ezekiel, two of the toughest characters of the Bible. Remember, we talked about another tough one recently, Nehemiah. Remember how he smote his congregation and plucked their hair out and plucked their beards out. You know, I'm saying that to point out not necessarily the opposition, but the way that God uses his tough characters compared to what we nowadays perceive to be a man of God or a preacher or a pastor. Remember that teaching on Nehemiah? Well, Isaiah and Ezekiel, two of the toughest, both prophets, both men of God, and we're going to extract some stories that on the face of it are going to be shocking if you don't know them, haven't heard them before. And most people haven't. And it's going to show the length to which God goes sometimes to make a point in order to make our point tonight. These men of God doing what God told them to do. Now you have to balance that in the light of what I was just saying earlier, where you say, show me what to do, God. God, I want to do what you want me to do. Now, put that on a back burner, or keep that in the wings as we get into the teaching tonight. I want you to first go into the book of Isaiah and the major prophets, to Isaiah chapter 20. We're going to show you and concentrate tonight that God, talking through Isaiah and telling him what to do. Give me a show of hands here in the chapel when you get there so I will know. Book of Isaiah. We're going to go to chapter 20 is where we're going to start. And to set the stage, tell you when this is taking place. Chapter 20 starts out in saying, in the year that Tartan came to Ashdod. So now we know when it happened. If you see a twinkle in my eye, I'm being somewhat facetious. It goes on to explain it parenthetically. It says, when Sargon, the king of Assyria, sent him. So now we know. And fought against Ashdod and took it. Verse 2, at the same time that was going on with Tartan and Ashdod, the same time spake the Lord by Isaiah. Now what is that saying? God is talking through Isaiah. Isaiah, man of God, we'll call him Pastor Isaiah, son of Amos, or the Reverend Isaiah, the Right Reverend Pastor Isaiah. Now, I'm not making fun of Isaiah. I'm really poking fun at our concept of men of God and preachers and pastors compared to God's viewpoint. At the same time spake the Lord by Isaiah, the son of Amos, saying, go and loose the sackcloth from off thy loins. I remember put flesh and blood on the Bible. No pun intended, or I should say pun intended. Go and loose the sackcloth from off thy loins, and put off thy shoe from thy foot. And he, Isaiah, Pastor Isaiah, did so, walking naked and barefoot. I'm going to pause there just long enough for you to picture that in your mind. Don't get locked in there, but appreciate what I was saying earlier when I said put flesh and blood on it, put yourself there. To say you're a congregant back in those days, and there's Pastor Isaiah walking naked and barefoot. And the Lord said, like my servant, again, in case you don't know, he's talking about his servant, his pastor, like my servant Isaiah hath walked naked and barefoot 3 years. We're not talking about 3 seconds. Remember back in the late 60s or 70s when they used to do streaking, where people would get their clothes off and run across someplace. No, we're not talking about streaking. We're not talking about 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 weeks, 3 months. We're talking about 3 years. Pastor Isaiah, the Reverend Isaiah, was walking around naked and barefoot. And sure, it doesn't take much imagination to picture CNN News, There they are on the scene again. This supposed man of God's walking around naked. 3 years. And then it goes on to say, and it's kind of funny when you see this part, for a sign and a wonder. And I guess that'd be a sign and a wonder to have your pastor walking around butt naked for 3 years. A sign and a wonder upon Egypt and upon Ethiopia. That's what God told him to do. That's what he's doing. Now, Pastor Isaiah is going to be told why. In the 4th verse, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptians prisoners and the Ethiopians captives, young and old, naked and barefoot, even with their buttocks uncovered, in case you don't understand what we're saying here, to the shame of Egypt. Now that's not the subject tonight, is not the prophecy. The subject is what a man of God is doing that God told him to do, to drive a point home, to prophesy, if you will, to prove a point, while we all sit around here saying, just tell me what to do, God. Just show me the way, lead the way, and I'll do it. So here we have a pastor, the Reverend Isaiah, son of Amos, walking around his congregation naked and barefoot 3 years to prove a point. I want you to jump with me in the book of Ezekiel. We're going to start out at the beginning of Ezekiel. And this one's going to be longer, but the other one's a little bit more, well, I was going to say dramatic, maybe not. You judge that. This one starts out in Ezekiel, towards the end of Ezekiel 1. This is when Ezekiel sees God and angels, or a UFO and ETs, if that's the way you want to look at it. But he sees all this astounding stuff. And at the end of the last of the part of verse 28, he sees as the appearance of a bow that's in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness around about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, Ezekiel talking, I fell upon my face. Down he went. So shocking and so astounding what he saw. This vision, boom, he goes down. And then we start, chapter 2. And he, God, said unto me, Son of man, God always called Pastor Ezekiel, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak unto thee. And the Spirit entered me, Ezekiel, when he spake to me, and set me upon my feet. Now, I don't know how much you've done watching over the years of TV preachers and TV evangelists. and how they always have this big thing about lining people up and knocking them down. When they knock them down, when they knock them down. I have a triple black belt in Taekwondo and Judo and Hapkido, and I can knock people down. That's not what God in the Spirit does. Here, he picks them up and puts them on his feet. And he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that hath rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me, even unto this very day. For they are an impudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God. Now what's he saying? That's a long way of saying God is talking through Ezekiel. Now we're talking about Pastor Reverend Ezekiel. The Right Reverend Pastor Ezekiel. God's going to talk to the people through him. And he doesn't care whether they pay attention or not. In the 15th verse it says, And whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house, yet shall know that there hath been a prophet among them. File that away, because what he's going to have Ezekiel do, he says, they're going to know there's been a prophet among them. So let's see what this test of a prophet is that they're going to be seeing here, that God said they're going to know. He shores Ezekiel, Pastor Ezekiel, up at chapter 6. He says, Be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks. If you remember Pastor Isaiah, I'm sure some people were looking, right? Now he's talking to Pastor Ezekiel. Be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks. That thou shalt speak my words unto them, whether they'll hear or whether they will forbear, whether they're going to listen or not. Do it. Repeats himself. Jump to chapter 3 with that groundwork. Again, if you look at chapter 3 and verse 11, the second half he's going to say it again. Whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, whether they listen or not. Go to verse 17. Am I giving you the wrong verse? That was chapter 3, verse 11, second half of it. Whether they will hear or whether they will forbear. Is that right or not? Okay. Now, go to verse 17. Son of man, God talking to Pastor Ezekiel. He says, I have made thee a watchman. And remember when we were teaching the lesson recently about feed my sheep, feed my flocks? And he uses the word pastor, and sometimes he uses the word shepherd. Sometimes he uses the word watchman. And that's what he's using here. He's saying, again, confirming we're talking about Pastor Ezekiel. The reason they call them watchmen is because they watch for your souls, is what these men of God do. I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word of my mouth. I'm going to tell you what to do. Give them warning from me. What the warning is not important. That's not the issue tonight. What we're showing here is God talking through somebody and telling him what to do and saying he's going to use them for a warning. Go to the 23rd verse. Wait a minute. Let's go here. Okay. Yes, 23rd verse. Then I arose and I went forth into the plain, and behold, the glory of the Lord stood there, as the glory which I saw by the river Chebar. Remember when he saw that before? What happened to him? It went down, passed out, right? So, here we go again. And I fell on my face. Down he goes again. Pastor Ezekiel. In case you missed it last time. Then the Spirit entered into me, just like he did before, and set me upon my feet. God's not knocking them down like the TV evangelist. He's picking them up. Set me on my feet, and spake with me, and said unto me, And here we go. Go shut thyself within thine house. I remember Pastor Isaiah dropped his clothes off, took his shoes off, and walked naked and barefoot for 3 years, doing what God told him to demonstrate a point. Pastor Ezekiel, go shut thyself within thine house. But thou, O son of man, behold, I shall put bands upon thee, and shall bind thee with them, and thou shalt not go out among them. He's not going to be able to move around. And I will make thy tongue cleave to the roof of thy mouth, that thou shalt be dumb. So he's going to make it so he can't talk. But listen carefully here. And thou shalt be dumb, and shalt not be to them a reprover, for they are a rebellious house. But when I speak with thee, I will open thy mouth, and thou shalt say unto them. Now listen carefully, very subtle. But what he's saying, what they are saying here, they're not saying when he talks with Pastor Ezekiel. They're saying when he talks with him. He's going to talk through Ezekiel. It's going to be his mouthpiece. It's like the gangsters used to call their lawyers their mouthpiece because they spoke for them. That's what they're saying here. When I speak with thee, I will open thy mouth, and thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, he that heareth, let him hear, and he that forbeareth, let him forbear, for they are a rebellious house. Chapter 4. Thou also, son of man, take thee a tile. Now start listening. Put flesh and blood on it. Put yourself there. Here's your pastor. Take a tile and portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem. So he's going to make a model of the city Jerusalem, or a drawing. It's not clear on that. He's going to portray the city Jerusalem on this tile and lay siege against it and build a fort against it and cast a mount against it, shove up some dirt against this. And set battering rams against it round about. But don't forget, CNN is watching this stuff. We got one Pastor Isaiah running around naked. They would think a perversion. We got this guy acting like a nut here. They're watching him, and he's got this thing. He's pushing dirt up against it. He's putting battering rams around it. It's going to get worse and worse, doing what God's telling him to do. Moreover, take unto thee an iron pan, and set it for a wall of iron between thee and the city. Set thy face against it. Let's say you're not CNN. Say you're congregants. What's the pastor doing? He's laying out there in the field with a frying pan on his face. Take thou an iron pan and set it for a wall of iron between thee and the city, and set thy face against it, and it shall be besieged. That's symbolizing the besiegement of Jerusalem. And thou shalt lay siege against it. This shall be a sign to the house of Israel. What was the other sign? The Reverend Isaiah walking around with his buttocks showing. Now this sign's going to be Pastor Ezekiel laying on the ground with a frying pan in front of his face over a model of Jerusalem. Lie thou also upon thy left side. While he's doing this, he can't just lay down on his back. He has to be laying on his left side, facing the frying pan. On the other side is a mound and battering rams and Jerusalem. Lie on the left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of days that thou shalt lie upon it. Thou shalt bear their iniquity. What? Days? We're not talking about he went out there for a few minutes. But listen to this. He's laying on his side, frying pan on his face. For I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days. 390 days. So shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. He's going to lay there on his left side for over a year. I think that's something around 13 months if you want to do the math. With his face, he gets a frying pan, symbolizing whatever he's symbolizing. God telling him what to do to talk to the people. CNN's out there. That crazy pastor lays on the ground for a year, and his congregants, what's he doing, How many months has it been? 9 months, 10 months, 12 months? Pastor's laying out there in a field with his face on his left side. And when thou hast accomplished then, they're going, oh, he's moving. Pastor's moving. He's getting up. Oh, no, he's going and laying on his right side now. And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side. Frying pan up against his face still. And thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. That's over a month. Laying on his right side. Now, remember, he's God's mouthpiece. He's talking to the people through Pastor Ezekiel. Again, those of us saying, God, show me what to do. Tell me what to do. Just tell me and I'll do it. Remember Pastor Isaiah and Pastor Ezekiel. Now, we're not through with the Right Reverend Ezekiel because we're going to go now to, hang on a second. After he's been laying on his side, or while he's laying on his side, he says, God, and behold, I will lay bands upon thee, and thou shalt not turn thee from one side to another, till thou hast ended the days of siege. So he can't even turn. He has to stay there. 390 days, 40 days. Or was it 395? Anyway, 13 months on one side. Now, it's a merciful God. He knows the poor Pastor Ezekiel has to eat. So he's going to tell him, take thou also unto thee wheat and barley and beans and lentils and millet and fitches and put them in one vessel and make thee bread. Make yourself some bread. According to the number of days thou shalt lie on thy side, 390 days, so it's 390, shalt thou eat thereof. So you could have this bread to eat. And thy meat which thou shalt eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day. From time to time thou shalt eat it. Thou shalt drink also water by measure, 6 part of a hin from time to time. Who's telling him to do this? God. 12th verse. And thou shalt eat it as barley cakes. Okay, God. And thou shalt bake it with dung that cometh out of man in their sight, is what it says here. God talking to his man of God, Ezekiel. He's telling him, eat S, right? And the Lord said, even thus shall the children eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, whither I will drive them. So now he's telling you why he's having Pastor Ezekiel do that. They didn't tell him before. They just told him, go do this. Ezekiel's doing it. And then now it's Ezekiel talking, the Right Reverend Ezekiel saying, then said I, O Lord, behold, my soul hath not been polluted. From my youth up until now I have not eaten anything which dieth of itself, or is of torn to pieces, neither came there abominable flesh into my mouth. And here is our merciful God. He says, then he said unto me, God saying, lo, I've given you cow's dung for man's dung. So he's having mercy on him, but first he told him to eat man's dung in the sight of man. And then he's telling him, okay, cow's dung. And thou shalt prepare thy bread therewith. Not done with Ezekiel. He then tells him, and that's predicting and prophesying that the people are going to go to famine, is what they're doing there. In chapter 5, and thou, son of man, take thee a sharp knife. I mean, you remember the reporters out there, CNN's watching, the congregation's watching. He's doing all this stuff, laying on his side, not moving, laying on his other side, eating bread made with cow's dung. Take thee a sharp knife. Take thee a barber's razor, and cause it to pass upon thine head and upon thine beard. So shave your head, shave your beard. Then take 3 balances to weigh and divide the hair. Come on, folks, put flesh and blood on this. Picture yourself watching your pastor doing some, no pun intended, harebrained thing like this. Thou shalt burn with fire a 3rd part in the midst of the city. What's he doing now? He shaved his head and he shaved his beard. What's he doing now? He's burning it out in the middle of the city. When the days of the siege are fulfilled, thou shalt take a 3rd part and smite about it with a knife. Now what's he doing? Whacking his hair with a knife. Smite about it with a knife. And a 3rd part thou shalt scatter in the wind. Now what's he doing? He's taking the rest of his hair and beard and throwing it in the wind. And I will draw out a sword after them. He's combining the prophecy with what he's telling his pastor Ezekiel to do. Thou shalt take thereof a few in number and bind them in thy skirts. So take a few hairs and hide them. You know, how insane is that going to be looking to people who don't know what's going on? Here's your pastor out there laying on his side for how long now? 14 months, one side or the other, eating weird food made with cow's dung. Then finally he gets up. And he shaves his head and shaves his beard, starts whacking the hair and burning it and throwing it in the air and hiding some of it in his skirts. Then take them out again from the skirts and cast them in the midst of the fire and burn them in the fire. For thereof shall a fire come forth unto all the house of Israel. So he tells them what's coming. And over later on in the 5th chapter, in the 12th verse, it says, a 3rd part of thee shall die with pestilence and with famine. And they shall be consumed in the midst of thee. A 3rd part shall fall by the sword around about thee. And I'll scatter a 3rd part into all the winds and draw out a sword after them. This is what Pastor Ezekiel is symbolizing there. Not the message tonight. The point is, man of God doing what God told him to do. Now, staying with Pastor Ezekiel, bad enough with Pastor Isaiah running around naked, but now we got this guy here. We're going to have more stuff happen with him. Go to the 12th verse of Ezekiel. The word of the Lord, again, just so you don't make any mistake who's telling him to do this or why he's doing it. The word of the Lord also came unto me, saying, Son of man, thou dwellest in the midst of a rebellious house, which have eyes to see and see not. And they have ears to hear and hear not, for they are a rebellious house. Now, what's he going to do? 3rd verse, therefore, Son of man, that's Pastor Ezekiel, prepare thee stuff for removing. Get your things ready. Get your stuff ready to move. And remove by day in their sight, right in front of the congregation. And thou shalt remove from thy place to another place in their sight. 4th verse. Thou shalt bring forth thy stuff by day in their sight. Now, that sounds simple enough, but stuff for removing, thou shalt go forth even at night, at even in their sight. 5th verse. Remember, the reporters are still out there from CNN, MSNBC. What's that new one? Al Jazeera. For God's sakes, Al Jazeera news in this country. Anyway, they're all out there watching this. He's telling Pastor Ezekiel, dig through the wall in their sight and carry out thereby. He can't just go through the sliding doors or whatever. He's got to dig through the wall to move his stuff out of the house. In their sight shalt thou bear it upon thy shoulders. He's going to carry all his stuff, his furniture, forth in the twilight. And get this. Thou shalt cover thy face, that thou shalt not see the ground. So he's going to go out with a hood over his head, through the wall, carrying his stuff out of the house. And here we go again. For I have set thee for a sign unto the house of Israel. I guess so. And I did so, as I was commanded. I brought forth my stuff by day, as stuff for captivity, and in the even I dig through the wall with my hand. So he has to dig through the wall with his hands, put a hood over his head, get all his stuff out of his house through the wall, and take it somewhere else. I brought it forth in the twilight, and I bare it on my shoulder in their sight. And then God says, ninth verse, Son of man, hath not the house of Israel, the rebellious house, said unto thee, what doest thou? When you could hear the reporter said, Sir, Reverend, with a microphone, why are you doing that? 11th verse, he's telling him, say, I am your sign. Like as I have done, so shall it be done unto them. They shall remove and go into captivity. And the prince that's among them shall bear upon his shoulder in the twilight and go forth, and shall dig through the wall to carry out their... The prophecy comes along, what he's portraying there through Pastor Ezekiel. Now it's kind of breathtaking, throwing all that stuff at you, realizing, I'm sure a lot of people out there, and I'll raise your hand for you, I've never heard anything like that before. Didn't even know such things existed in the Bible. You can hear the old saints saying, angels purify the air, when they're hearing about Pastor Isaiah running around with his buttocks showing and Pastor Ezekiel eating dung. What's the point? There is no direct point in this other than to show some extreme examples of a spiritual reality. Yeah, it's easy. If you want to do what God wants, it's easy for God to say, you can picture God saying, go get that Cadillac. I left the keys in it, and drive it up the hill to that mansion and go live the mansion and go there. Yeah, good. That's easy to do that kind of stuff. This is an illustration showing that God can do anything he wants to, how he wants to, his own way. And don't put God in a box. Don't box him up in a nice little neat box to fit your narrow-minded view of what's right or wrong, or what God should or shouldn't do, or what God's men or women should or shouldn't do. I focused on preachers, pastors. It can be any man or woman of God doing what God wants them to do. God knows it all. He sees the whole picture. He's on the corners, we teach, before we get there. And there's a reason for everything that he does or has you or asks you to do. Trust him. And that's my message tonight. And it's offering time. Don't give unless you've been taught. I dare say most of you have never been taught a message like that before. And in the book of Galatians in the New Testament, chapter 6, it says, if you've been taught in the Word, we're talking about the Word of God, you share materially. The word that's translated as fellowship, which is translated in the Greek word koinonia, which means to jointly participate or to share materially. And then it goes on to say, with the one that taught you. So the address should be up on the screen. God's formula starts out with a tithe. If you don't know what to do, tithe. That's 10%. Don't play games asking me or asking whether that's net or gross. That's between you and God. That you just give the 10%. There's other giving which we'll get to in the future. There's other formulas for giving, but that's a good starting point. So for the offertory tonight, we're going to have I'll trust in you.
I'll trust in you when my road ahead is rough. Have faith in you when I feel I've had enough. When I'm going through the darkness, daylight will come soon enough. When I don't know what to do, I'll trust in you. King David said, there are valleys we all face, blessed men go through. They live from strength to strength. When I'm feeling bruised and broken, Jesus whispers, child, have faith. When I don't know what to do, I'll trust in you. For faith and trust, you give me peace and grace. You sent your Son to die and take my place. Your greater plan I cannot see, but I know in you I'm safe. When I don't know what to do, I'll trust in you. I'll be faithful through and through. I'll trust in you. My Lord, you always pulled me through. I'll trust in you.
Thank you, guys. I don't have much to add, but a couple of important things to say. And that is the attacks are on all over. And you guys out there in Pennsylvania, I know what's going on. Us linking up together and others that are out there. Fight goes on both sides. God doesn't want this to succeed. He doesn't want his truth to get out there. He's going to get you. So you keep your dukes up, keep your faith dukes up, bow your head and keep moving forward. The plan's already set out. You're going to make it as long as you trust and keep on walking forward in faith. Now, while you're getting attacked out there, we're getting attacked in here because he doesn't want the word getting out to you. And he doesn't want you supporting the word getting out to others. So we know the plan. We know what to do. Love you guys. You hang in there. You keep on fighting and keep on walking in faith.
Well, I searched and I searched for a road that led to glory. I wondered if I'd ever find my way. I was so dismayed, for the road it seemed so lonely. But then I heard a voice within me say, you've got to keep on walking, keep right on walking, walking in the light of the Lord. You'll get to heaven someday, can only get in the faith way, walking in the light of the Lord. Well, I faced and I faced, and the Lord, he gave me mercy. I faced and he brightened up my way. I sat down to rest walking in the light of the Lord, walking in the light of the Lord, walking in the light.